meeting, so this is the last in-person monthly meeting of this year, but we'll have other activities continuing on. So is there anyone here that's a new member, someone we don't know yet? Stand up and introduce yourself. So you're just a beginner. Yeah. 62. That's a record.
And I'm working at Woodcrafters 3 days a week.
That's where I remember you from.
A great retirement.
Yeah.
And I brought some stuff in. I'm going to be doing demos.
Or you were at Woodcraft rather when I dealt with you. Yeah, that's where we met. Yeah.
Several of us moved to Woodcrafters.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, welcome to the Northwest Woodturners. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Tonight, the first order of business is election of officers. According to our bylaws, we do that in November. I think it's going to be fairly short and sweet. Roger Crooks, who has been president in the past, is running for president again. I'm running for vice president to continue on, if that's all right. And yeah, so I guess I nominate myself. Tammy Connolly, who I don't see here tonight, has also said she would stay on if that's okay with everybody as secretary. And then Mike Meredith, who is ill tonight, would otherwise be here, is our treasurer, and he will also stay in there if you all agree. So let's go one at a time. If you think Roger Crooks would make a great president, say aye now.
Yeah.
Aye. You're president. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a call-in vote? Yeah. Any nays? It's pretty much unanimous. All right. How about Dave Wood for vice president?
Aye.
Aye. Nay? My wife's not here. She can't say anything. And for secretary, Tammy Connolly?
Aye.
Aye. I would agree with that. And Mike Meredith for treasurer?
Aye.
Lord knows we do not want to start over with a new treasurer at this point. Okay, so that makes it official. We thank you very much. I want to put in a brief plug for Rob Boatman here, who's selling the raffle tickets. We have a lot of wood here to pass out to the lucky winners tonight. So if you haven't got your tickets, he's still selling tickets, and you get 6 tickets for $5 or they're $1 each. I think I remember that right. Okay. An announcement on the Oregon Wood Turning Symposium. That's coming up in March 14th, 15th, and 16th next year. It's in Albany again at the Albany Convention Center, which is a very nice venue for a group that size. I would say from my experience last year, if you want to stay down there, make your hotel reservation about now, because there's 2 hotels right on the property where you can, in 5 minutes, walk from the hotel to the convention center. And once they're full, the next one is a fair drive from there. So if you're going to go down and you want to stay overnight, then book your hotel now. Yeah. March.
Cards there for the symposium. You can pass it out to your friend.
March 14th, 15th, and 16th. So that's probably Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'm going to guess.
Hey,
Questions over here.
Oh, Steve.
we made our reservations this last week and check the OWS website for which hotel is giving you the deal, because one of them wanted to charge us like $700-800 and the other was like $4 something.
Yeah.
So check the website, make sure you go to the one that's offering a group deal.
Patty. One is the Comfort Inn or Comfort Suites. And what was the other one?
Yeah.
Holiday Express. Yeah.
I think it's the Holiday Express that's giving the deal. I think
Okay.
Comfort Suites was like $700-800.
I stayed in the Comfort last year. It wasn't that expensive, but it was very nice. But there's nothing wrong with either one. They're both fairly new hotels, so should be fine. John Beachwood, who is not able to be here tonight, asked me to give a little education update. What we put in the newsletter pretty much brings you up to speed. But our education committee with Stuart Pemble Belkin, who's he's the coach recruiter and instructor recruiter. Aaron Bloom is handling the text documents and doing the email blasts and things. And Parley Savage puts the manuals together, the class notebooks that we pass out each time. So that's all working very smoothly. And little by little, they're getting better at going into the administrative side of our website and learning the tricks of making that work. So it's all working quite well. And whereas I used to do all of that, I do very little of it anymore. The next thing we will do, though, is set the dates for the first quarter classes. We haven't done that yet, but we'll start as we did this year toward the end of January for the sharpening class. Probably 2 to 3 weeks after that, we'll do the 2 basics classes, bowls and spindles, or spindles first, probably then bowls. And then 201s we'll do probably, we want to be done with those by the end of March. So watch for those. We'll get them in the website as soon as we have dates. And then don't forget that Saturday this week, the day after tomorrow, is the open shop. And Jason is going to continue his presentation from tonight with a little bit more on Christmas ornaments and how you do it and so on. So he'll be our little 30-minute demo at the open shop. And we do have a good, we have gotten rid of an awful lot of wood, thankfully to all of you and other members and a couple of other organizations that we were able to put some wood to. And but we're getting fresh wood in. We got some cherry last Saturday that's green, but it's really nice. And so that's available. And there's the rumor of a great big leaf maple that's coming. When Mark was there Saturday, he gave me a little word on that, but we haven't got it yet, but we are out of big leaf maple. So that would be good. So the supply of our turning blanks is rolling over. That's what we want it to do. We want to keep new fresh wood in there as much as we can. And that's working pretty well. So that's the program for education. The demos coming up in January, we're going to have the tool swap, of course, so we don't really have a meeting. February, we have Janice Levy coming. For those of you that know that name, she was here, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. She's a very, very accomplished pyrographer, wood burning. And so I took that class last time and it was really interesting because I'd never done anything like that with any detail involved. So she's putting on that, and then so that'll be our Thursday night demo in February, and then she'll stay Friday and Saturday and have classes. So we'll be posting those soon. I would highly recommend that you take a hard look at that one. It's a great class and out of the ordinary. We don't see that very often, and she does a great job. We'll probably do it at my place where we have lots of plugs. The problem with the gym here is there's only about 2 plugs. So, and we'll have plenty of, each person will have their own wood burning machine. So that's good. That's coming up. March, we have Tom Willing, our own, who will do he's created a little class demonstration, and maybe we'll talk more about classes, but how to chuck wood without a chuck, and how to hold it and grip it, and all the different ways you can do that without a four-jaw screw chuck. So it's quite interesting, an idea that he had that we talked about, and the more we talked, the more I liked it. So have you ever taught that before, Tom, or is this the first time? Yeah, right. Yeah, so it is, I think it'll be very interesting. And then in April, a new member, Neil Siegel, who I think I saw him here tonight, there he is going to do a demonstration on off-center turning, making a ladle, which he brought out to the shop last weekend. That's going to be a fun one. So watch for that in April. Beyond that, we haven't made any deals, but we are talking to a number of other demonstrators, and we'll keep you posted. We'll try to get a couple of the bigger name guys to come in also. at some point during the year. So that's what's coming up in education. Any questions on any of that or other new business? Steve?
I think Neil took one of his ladles to AAW and he was called out as.
He did,
those
yes.
people that they make special comments about because they loved it.
Yes, he was selected, yeah. So
Big honor.
I guess he is kind of a big name guy
Yeah,
after all,
yeah.
yeah. Doug,
For the new people, new experience.
question is, would I explain what the tool swap is for new people? In the month of January, we meet in this room and everybody who has tools they don't use anymore or they just don't want, we all come in here. It's a flea market type tool swap. You buy and sell from each other. All we do is host the venue for it. There are some deals to be had. I've enjoyed those tool swaps every year. I'm still using the wood burner that I got from Bill. I snaked it out of him for $27. He could have driven a harder bargain, but it was a good deal. So there's always, those are fun and there's some good deals to be had. So that's what we do in January, right here in this room.
What did you think, Jim?
Pyrography, wood burning.
No, when?
Oh, sorry, February, it's the February 5th meeting. She'll be the demonstrator, yeah. And then classes on Friday and Saturday following, yeah. Other questions? New business, comments?
On the tool swap, we ask you that, please do register. You don't have to register for any other meeting, but if you're gonna sell something, register that we make sure we have enough tables.
Yeah, so we can plan ahead. Bill?
I have something to say.
Yeah.
So. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so the Zoom people can hear.
Oh, okay. So one of the things I love about this club is that there are volunteers that step up when things are needed. And I did that 6 years ago when I foolishly said I would help do the newsletter. And so I've done the newsletter for six years now. And
it's a hell of a newsletter.
oh, thanks. It's really not that hard to do, but it does take a little bit of a commitment. Sometimes it's a little bit like wrangling cats, trying to get everyone to get their articles in. The best part is you can make it whatever you want it to be. And I feel like I've done that for 6 years. And what I'm looking for now is someone to transition into the new newsletter editor. And I certainly can help for as long as it needs help. But I am looking to kind of relinquish the reins of newsletter editor and giving that power to someone else. So
Okay.
if anyone's interested, please somehow either contact me or Roger, our president.
Yeah, the new president.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, Bill is a great publisher. And we were voted the best newsletter in the nation just 3 years ago. So whoever chooses to be his understudy, trust me, you're learning from a real professional.
And I have the template all ready to go. All you need to do
Yeah.
is just throw the things in,
True.
throw the words and pictures in there.
Yeah. So
that's
all
it.
right, good. Thanks, Bill. If there's nothing else, I think we're ready for show and tell. Oh, one more.
Don has a proposal and he'd like to talk about it.
So, social media, you guys heard of that? Well, if you can come out of your shop for a second and check Facebook, we have a Facebook page now where we discuss and share what we're doing with each other. It's just one of those things. It's called Oregon Wood Turners. And you're all welcome to come, and we just joke. And we have a good time. It's good for beginners. So if you have a beginner nagging you with all these questions, which can happen, you just turn them loose there and they can ask the questions anytime, real time. And usually there's somebody there that can help them. So it would be fun to see you on social media. Thanks, Roger. Oregon Wood Turners.
When what?
It's a Facebook page, but,
You're doing it live, what day, Saturday, Sunday? What's that? It's the 24/7. 24/7.
yeah.
It's a function of who's conscious at the time they ask.
But let me just talk to Don for a second. So the initial proposal was, did Northwest Woodturners want to have a page for that'd be supported by this club? And that's something that the board needs to vote on. Don has put up a page called Oregon Woodturners, right? That is not tied directly to Northwest. But I think if Northwest wants to have a page, we need to have some admins that will keep it fresh and keep responding to people. If people send a question in, we need to respond quickly because that represents our club. The Facebook page that Don has looks really nice and it's fine. But the question for the board and for you guys are going to be, does Northwest Woodturners want to have a Facebook page? And that's something that will bring up at the next board meeting. But to do so, we need people that will volunteer to help Don and anyone else that wants to support that page. Is that correct, Don? You okay with that? Okay. And thanks for bringing that up. What else did we have? Is that it?
Steve's gonna do.
Okay. So next is show and tell, and Steve, where'd he go? There he is. Steve's
over
all
here.
ready to go.
Okay,
And by the way this works is we have two microphones. The Zoom crowd can't hear anything that goes over this microphone. So when you come up to talk about it, use the microphone so the Zoom people know what you're talking about.
okay,
Cool.
we have a lot of pieces to go over and we've got a voluminous demonstration, so we don't want to take too much time on this. So limit your comments, don't make them real long. So we have time to get to Jason. So first up, Roger has a number of pieces. Roger, you want to come and talk about your pieces? Okay, well, we'll go to someone else
No,
first.
I'm ready to
You
go.
ready?
You can hold it up. I don't need to walk over there.
Okay,
So a friend of mine gave me a couple plum logs, and some of them is in the Dave's shop to sell. And plum, if you've ever worked with plum, cracks really easy by just looking at it. But so far this hasn't. And so I got two bowls there. One is not quite finished because it has a rounded bottom and it rocks quite nicely. So far the bark is held on. And if you read the newsletter, there's an article in Turning Natural Edge Bowls. This is the time to do it because trees have gone to sleep and the bark should stay on.
excellent. Rob has a lot of energy and a lot of pieces. Rob, you want to come talk about your pieces?
Yeah, I did a live edge cherry. It was actually a lot harder than wood than I thought. I always thought cherry was pretty soft, but it's a burl, so it was pretty hard. A maple burl. It's one of my favorite pieces that I've done. Just that has curl, bird's eye, and spalting all in one piece. It's CA glue because it was a little bit punky is why I started out with it. And it's a clear finish that I found that so it doesn't yellow as much. And then I did a little box. So it's two pieces of wood here. So it's on the table saw and rotated the wood. And so I got two pieces and put it together like a spring. And on the table saw it, so you can see where it's, thinner, thicker. So I just did it kind of random, but it's a spring so you can compress it. So you got a really good one together. And then I had my son-in-law come over today and he made a screwdriver. So what unique about this is he's a battalion chief with the fire department in California. And so whenever the guy becomes from a rookie to be a full-fledged fireman, they do a little thing where a drill, he doesn't know what's going on. He's going up 7 staircases, get to the roof, and that's when they change his helmet, unscrew the rookie to put the real thing on. And so it's a 1, 3, 5, 4 is a battalion that he's with or whatever. So
Rob usually brings these interesting machine pieces. It's nice to see that he's got a great eye for wood as well. These are amazing, beautiful. Don Gunther. I don't remember how long Don's been turning, but these are fantastic.
Okay, so I'm playing around with English walnut, not black walnut, English walnut. There's a difference. There's a lot of character and stuff. Black walnut is good for furniture, but it's hard. It's just pretty bland unless you got the skills that we just saw. So I always pick a good colorful wood and then try to do my best, but it's the wood that's beautiful. And this is a bigger one, and you can see it has a beautiful feather in it. And I turned it, but then I thought you guys would think I'm a total idiot, which is close. But anyway, so I wanted to say, I can make thinner walls, but the thick walls are all the go now. So I right quick turned this one a couple nights ago just to show you I could turn. That's all this is here for, is to, so you don't think I'm really stupid. And then this is my practice one, and I put a bead bottom on it because everybody else does something else. And so I had to be original. And then I went to turn this one. This is actually the center of a feather in a large walnut tree. That is the center of a feather. That's a beautiful piece there. And so I got it almost done. You know, I roughed it and dried it and did everything. And I was going along and my gouge wasn't working right. And I was just having all kinds of trouble. So I called for the hospital and brought this over to the hospital, which is Dave Wood's shop. And he made a couple of finished passes on there and showed me. And the end of my gouge had one of them bird things on it. He called it a beak bird or something like, I can't remember. Maybe it was a seagull, but he told me that, and he fixed my bowl gouge, and then we finished it off. And that's really a collaborative bowl. But, you know, got to give credit where credit is due. I was the idiot and Dave was the intelligent one. So, but anyway, that's a real beautiful one. Thank you.
Nice work. There's a mallet here. Unnamed. Who's mallet? Rich? Why don't you talk about your other pieces as well? And hold them up for the camera when you show them.
Sure. Yeah, these back as well.
Hi, my name's Rich Chambers. I am a woodturner of a long time. That's enough. I work part-time at Woodcrafters downtown. Steve Penberthy, who owns Woodcraft, has asked me to start doing turning demos every Friday and Saturday. So it's like getting invited for dessert. I have a 2-hour demo in the morning, usually starting around 10:30, and another 2-hour demo in the afternoon, starting around 1, and I finish whenever I finish. I've left some flyers up here. Among other things, it describes what I just said, but there's also a number of subjects that I'm going to be covering in these demos. So what I would like is if you take one of those, I've left my email address so you can get to me with other things, other ideas, things you'd like to know about. It's amazing what you can do in a 2-hour demo. So let me show you some other things. So this was a mallet that I made from walnut. I would have preferred lignum vitae, but walnut's what I had, with a fairly curly maple handle. It was again, this was a 2-hour demo. Turned first the handle, made the hole the right, made the pin in it, and then turned the head and turned that hole to the proper size so that it would fit together, and held it together with thick CA. It was a good little project. This is the bowl I did just last Saturday, as a matter of fact. It's Paduk. It is a very simple bowl. It's about 6 inches in diameter. It's the finish is I don't know whether you've used Starbond CA, but it is absolutely, my opinion, the best. It's really good glue, but the other thing that they figured out is that CA glues tend to harden and tend to fill up the tube and things like that. So they include extra caps, extra tubes, little capillary tubes. So it's really a neat one. But one of their latest formulas is what they call heavy thin. Heavy thin is an oily kind of texture, and it goes on almost like a finish. So I put that on first, let it dry, give it a light sanding, and then I put on some gloss armor seal. And then I just spin the bowl to dry that. So this is a 2-hour bowl with including the finish and drying it. Thank you. This was a little bowl that I did specifically to demonstrate turning a bowl and then adding a rim of a different material. This one is a simple little bowl. It's only about 3 or 4 inches in diameter. But the point of it was talking about how I harvest rims from pieces of wood that I'm turning and how to glue them in and then treat it as a finished piece. And finally, this was a couple of demos. This was a Paduk bowl, very much like the one I just showed you. And in the afternoon that day, I made a lid for it. This is a lid from a different piece of Paduk. Part of the challenge is turning a really thin piece from a really thin piece of wood. It's the trick is how do you keep a hold of them? So I was covering that. And then the next part of the demo was turning a tagua nut, also called vegetable ivory. So this knob was turned from a tagua nut. So I talked about how you hold on to it, how you turn it around, starting to get it something you can turn, because they're a very odd, unpredictable shape. So I have a lot of other demos coming up. Let me see, the one I'm doing tomorrow in the morning will be turning a calabash style bowl. So it'll be a short one. That starts at probably start around 10:30. So thank you for your attention. And if you'd like to pick up a flyer, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, John Drake. Magnolia Bowl.
So this is basically a turning of frustration. This is a magnolia that I've had for about 6 years, and I finally got a real lathe. I got a Powermatic 3520 this past summer at the AAW convention. So I was able to start turning larger things. And when I started this, I had an inclusion that I was chasing from the one side. And when I thought I got to the bottom, I flipped it around and realized it wasn't as shallow as I thought it was. So that's what kind of generated the shape. And then I was cleaning out the internal and trying to make the bottom as nice as I could, but I overdid it. And when I turned it to take off the tenon on the bottom, it became too thin. So if you were to put a ruler across here, the center is actually further out than the edge, which made me have to put some feet on it. So it's one of those things where you really wonder if you should continue working on it, but I finished it. I put it on there. I put some walnut oil on it, and I'm really happy with it. So I said it was a frustrating piece to get through, but I think it turned out really well.
It's all about problem solving. Ripplinger, he got the biggest dogwood in the Tri-County area.
So this is from 2 years ago. A neighbor cut down a really big dogwood tree, and actually I cored it, and this is from the middle size of the bowls. So I do have a couple really big ones, and of course, thanks to Dale Larson for having helped me with cutting it up. But anyway, the dogwood is nice stuff to turn.
Thank you. And Don Jensen, there he is.
I think it was January, we had ice storm and a massive, they called it the heritage oak tree in Selwood, went down. And I just happened to go by, and it was like people cutting slabs off a whale. It was huge. Anyway, it was a lovely piece of wood, and this is what came from it.
And then Patty Cabbage.
Hello.
Hi.
This is my first bowl. I made in the bowl. I made this in the bowl class, my first bowl. It's walnut wood. And Roger was my coach.
And Trembolier by Danny. I think that's how they say it. Trembolier.
Yeah.
Trembler.
So it's French. This is Jatoba for the trembler. It's different from the others I've turned. This one's hanging from the top rather than from the bottom up. Then it's just maple for the base and the top. And this one I like. This is the first one I've done that I like technically and artistically. I've been able to get one or the other, but not them together. And this one I like. This one I like. So now I just have to get a little faster at it. But since I'm a slow turner, I now have an excuse.
Excellent work. These are just two pieces where I was working out bugs. I offered to teach this project in Phoenix next week, and I looked at the underside of the one that I had at home, and it turned out that I turned it in like 2000. And so I had to figure out how I'd done it and work out the bugs. That's why they're unfinished. This one's a salt cellar that pivots on a brass rod and has a magnet that holds it in place, also unfinished. So for prizes, oh, Jason, the miniature.
Yeah, mine was so small that it got missed. Yeah. So we heard about the Tigwa nut. These are made from a beetle nut, which is very similar. They're kind of chewed as a narcotic in certain parts of the world, like in India. And so it's like vegetable ivory. It's a nut, very interesting to turn, and really cool patterns in it. But so there's a woodworking forum called Wood Barter. And we have a bi-monthly turning competition on there. And a couple months ago, we did miniature turning, and I saw someone turn some of these. So I got on Etsy and ordered some of these from India. But really interesting to turn something so small and to turn that type of material.
What tool did you use?
They disappeared into all the other shavings.
He's chewing them right now. Neil.
Bought a bag of those, probably about 50 or 60 of them in a bag from an Asian market on 87. So they can be sourced locally.
Excellent. All right. So prizes for the turnings. We have to give one for the first bowl. I mean, to bring in your first bowl, that's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and the trembler? And then Don Jensen, not Don Jensen, Don Gunther brought in 4 beautiful bowls. Right.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Jason.
Hey, guys, there's plenty of chairs back there if you want to get a chair.
All right, can you hear the mic? That sounds good. A little bit of an echo though. All right, so tonight's demo is going to be a little bit different. I'm playing around with a different format. A little nervous to see how this is going to work. So tonight, the main topic is selling your work. You can see a demonstration sales booth that I brought in, but I'm also going to be doing some turning. I'm a little behind on my production work for the holidays, so you guys get to see me do some of my production work. Not that I'm a professional wood turner, but this is just a hobby for me. So I've been turning for about 6 years and kind of lucked into selling a little bit. My turning started fairly typical for what a lot of you have probably experienced. You start turning, you make things, pretty soon your shelves are getting really full and your spouse is, you got to do something with this. You can't take my entire bookshelf for your stuff. And you end up with some family that wants to buy, oh, can you sell, I would love to buy a bowl for a Christmas present or a wedding present or something. And so that was pretty typical. But then I lucked out when I had started posting some stuff on Instagram and Facebook, and I had a former coworker reach out and said, hey, my cousin is opening a gift shop out in Troutdale and looking for some local artists to sell some of their stuff in her store. And I said, okay, I'll try that. And then her store didn't open for almost a year after that because she was struggling with the city of Troutdale to get the permits. But she told me about a street fair that they do on First Fridays during the summer. And this was as things were just starting to open up after COVID. So street fair, people were so excited to get out and go do something, but also they had stimulus money in their pocket. Can you still hear me pretty well with the mask on? So with a little bit of extra jingle in their pocket and excitement about getting out, could sell stuff pretty well. And so I learned quite a bit about selling in that first summer, and then started selling on commission at the gift shop and learned a few things, but there's still a lot to learn. So I am by no means an expert. I don't do this professionally. I don't do this full time. I'm a desk jockey at Nike. So this is partially just my way to get out of the house and do something productive at night. The kids go to bed. My wife is doing her jewelry business that she does do full time. And I go out to the shop and do some turning. So as I turn, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about what I'm turning. It's mostly just to see some of the stuff I do. And while we have a conversation about selling, how many of you have sold something that you've turned? That's a big majority. How many of you have done a show where you've actually done a booth or something like that? There's still quite a few of you. I would imagine that a lot of you, it's kind of like how I started off. Word of mouth, you have someone like, oh, I would love to buy a piece from you. And that's a great way to get started. And what I like about one thing I found when I was practicing this, when you're talking about something else and trying to turn, you get the steps all mixed up. So I keep moving the tailstock before I'm ready. But one of the things that I love about selling is now I can afford to buy all the toys and all the tools without getting in trouble for taking money out of the checking account. My wife still rolls her eyes, but it's my hobby money, so I can spend it how I want to. It's not liking it. So right now I'm just turning a top. This is a really easy thing to turn. And we'll talk a little bit about it when we go and look at the booth. Some of the great things about having tops in your booth. Really easy to sell and a really easy price point for people to actually purchase something. You can get really creative with it. And you can also, this is great practice. So I haven't taken Tom's beginning spindle class, but I know that he has you guys do the beads and cove sticks, right? How many of you have done a bead and cove stick as practice? So you do your beads and your coves, and it's great practice. Very good practice. I recommend it. I would also recommend that you can turn a bunch of tops and practice the same things. So as much as I appreciate Tom, I have a very different way that I like my practicing for spindle turning. And you can get pretty quick at this and have a lot of fun. And that's just about it. It's just about done. A lot of times I won't even bother sanding this. If I do, it's just a quick little bit of a sand. But here's a part where you can include kids at a pretty young age. So if I slow this down, they don't have to turn with the turning tools where they're cutting, but they can do the coloring, and it's very similar. So you can take a marker and just make a little spiral there, or you can do some rings. And Sharpies work really well for this. And you can do all different colors. And turn the speed back up a little bit, and then just part it off. Another little helpful tip. I like to keep a hobby knife, a carving knife, that you can trim the little nub off of the top of your turnings. So just trimming that little nub off. That way you don't have to try and figure out a way to turn it so you can turn the other side. So these are great for sales, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So what are some of the other ways that you guys have ended up selling some of your work? Auctions? I have not sold anything in an auction, but that is a good one. What else? Online. I have sold a little bit online, but I found without people being able to see my work, it was difficult for me. But I did have a really good experience. A few years ago, my dad brought a bunch of wood up from Oklahoma and made some pieces. And I had an Etsy store. Of course, I had an Etsy store. My wife has a career selling on Etsy. So she's like, you got to do an Etsy store. I ended up really not liking it, but I did it. And I sold a piece. And when I sold it, I put a note in it that my dad had brought this up from Oklahoma. My sons like to be out in the shop when I'm turning, and it's really a family affair. And I was just trying to add a personal touch. But she thought, and then after she received it, she said, I cried when I got your note. I want to send this back to you because this has so much family meaning for you. And so I said, that is very kind of you. I appreciate it, but I have a whole pickup load of this wood and I make a lot of them. So yes, it was a meaningful bowl, but I make so much stuff that it's all for sale. So one of the valuable things about tonight is you're not just selling your wood, you're selling stories. And whether that story is I know where this tree came from, or I helped cut this down, or this is a special type of wood. Maybe it's a heritage tree or something like that. Sell stories and not just wood. So I'm turning a little mini birdhouse here. A little helpful tip. If you're going to drill a hole, it's great if you drill a hole and then do another pass across it. You'll get a little bit of tear out when you drill it, and you'll clean up any of that tear up with another pass. There's a little cove, a little bit of practice there. Tom would be very proud. So just a little bit of sanding. And then when I'm doing these quick little projects for a finish, I love this hot wax finish. So this one has a little bit of shellac in it, but it's mostly just wax. And so just put it on there, and then some paper towel. The blue shop towels are great for this. Get this out of the way. You want some pretty good speed, and then you're going to use friction to melt that wax. And you can really use pretty much any kind of wax for this and spread it around. Now there's a pretty nice finish on that took 30 seconds or less. You know, when you're doing a nice bowl, an heirloom style bowl, you might want something more than that. But for these quick Christmas ornament type things, gift type things, you don't need to get much fancier than that. It's always weird getting used to a different lathe than what you work with at home. So this is almost done. Sometimes I will use some tailstock support on this, but I like to just turn it down to the end and then just kind of nip it off. And part of what's fun with these is you can do it so many different ways. You can make them long and skinny. You can make them short and fat. You can do a point on the bottom. You could do it flat on the bottom. You can do little eye hooks on the top, or you can drill a hole and use fishing line. So I've got a whole set of drill bits up here of different sizes. So I'm going to use a really small drill bit. So this isn't finished turn down here, but I'm going to go straight across. And if you look, so right now I'm looking down this way. If I tilt my head, I can look this way to help make sure that I'm centered through the wood. Helps if you go in forward instead of reverse. So if you just keep turning your head, tilting it to the side, you can make sure you drill right through the center. And then I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but you can see there's some tear out there from drilling. So by drilling and then going back and doing your finish pass, you clean all of that up. Do just a touch of sanding. And you don't want to get that too thin because then you might pop it off while you're doing your finishing. Actually, I'm going to show you guys one other thing that you can do with this. Switch out the tailstock here. I showed this last year in my demo. So this has a bearing in the end. and does a really nice job of holding something that's really delicate like this without marring the end. But now that I have a little bit of tail support, one way I could use the markers and add some color to the roof of this so that it has a little bit more contrast between the birdhouse and the roof. You can also burn it. So with just another piece of wood and some friction, can burn in some lines here. And now come back with the wax and the paper towel. We'll take this away. Well, that's one way to. So a little bit of a catch on that one, but you guys saw how quick I was able to do that. After you do 30 or 40 or 50 of these, you can get pretty quick at it. So even though that broke off, instead of cutting off, just trim that off with the knife and you have a nice clean finish. And then run your fishing line through there and tie a knot. You have a little ornament. The only thing that I still need to turn is the little perch. So just about, yeah. $1,000 or 600. It doesn't matter a whole lot, just something to soften the edges a little bit. Part of what you are getting better at with the practice is getting a nice smooth cut so that you don't have to sand very much. So this is a collet chuck and a dowel. So if I'm going to turn that little tiny perch, I don't need to start with a big piece of wood and turn it to sawdust. Just something little. This is one of those not a need to have, but I can buy because I sell enough of my work that I can splurge on some extra tools that make life a little bit easier. When you're turning something so small, that tool rest height becomes really important. It did. You got to tighten it up a little. So this is made to have, so you can put two handles in it and really reef down on it. But I find just hand tightening it is more than enough to hold that in. And then parting tool is great for the piece that is going to be inside the birdhouse. And if you take your, so you can measure your hole, but you can eyeball it and get it pretty close, and then a little bit of CA glue will work just fine. You don't have to get a super perfect fit there. But now I gotta pull it out just a little bit further. Well, when I'm at home in my shop, everything has a place. Not everything goes in its place all the time, but I can do a little bit better at that when I'm at home than when I'm here. So the knife always goes back in the sheath when I'm done with it at home. So just a little bit of sanding, a little bit of wax. This is really easy to lose when you part it off. But It doesn't take very much material or very much time, but you can hold on to it. And if you tuck this up against your forearm, you can manage this pretty reasonably well with just one hand. So you can kind of hold on to this piece as you part it off. And it's a lot easier when you're not demonstrating in front of a bunch of people and nervous and you're shaking a little bit. So it's a little bit tight. See, now it's gone. And when you're at home and you've got a whole pile of shavings underneath you, it's even more difficult. But here you can see one that I did last night. All right. So you've seen a little bit of my production. I got a couple items turned. Let's look at the booth a little bit here. And I got my notes here that I'm trying to check on. Talking a little bit more about selling and production. Production can be interesting. When you're making a whole bunch of something, you're going to get a lot of practice. You're going to get better at it. But sometimes it can be a little monotonous, turning the same things over and over and over. So Kevin and we started turning about the same time, about 6 years ago. And Kevin didn't bring any of his items in and had to leave earlier, but Kevin has gotten into incredibly artistic, really pushing the envelope on what he turns, and I'm turning handles over and over. So I've definitely had a little bit of envy at times, but I've also worked on my skills. I've gotten a lot better, and when I want to get a little more artistic, I have the skills to do it. So there are pros and cons to selling. But we talked about a couple different ways of selling. What I want to talk a little bit about tonight is a booth setup. And here in another month, we have the Guilds in the Village, is a craft show that happens here at the Art Center. And the Wood Turning Club has space where members can have a table and you can set up something like this and turn. So I lead that for the club. So if any of you are interested in selling at the show, it's the first weekend in December, reach out to me and let me know. You can find my contact information on the club's website. It's just jasond.goodrich@gmail. Or talk to me afterwards, but I'll probably still have you send me an email so I don't have to try and memorize everything. But we do 3 shows a year that are sponsored by the club. So the club will front the money to buy the space, and then we pay for the space out of the sales. So it's a really great benefit that the club has to create some of these opportunities. I realize that selling is not for everybody. You know, I said there are pros and cons. Just like turning a teapot might not be something that we're all going to do after seeing a demonstration like that. Selling might not be something that you want to do. Maybe you want to focus on just doing stuff for your fun, for your family. You don't have a lot of time to dedicate to it, because I put in a lot of hours. I put in a lot of grind to get ready for a show. But if you are interested, the club creates some great opportunities to do that. And you know, we have some people who have been great successful sellers that can help, and you can kind of learn some of those things without having to venture out on your own. But here, looking at this setup, this is a typical one table setup. Usually if you're setting up a booth, you're going to have like a 10 by 10 booth. You might end up having 3 tables. But when we do the club shows, usually you're getting about 1 table per person. And so there are, with booth setup, I came up with this last night, 4 L's. There's looks, make sure it looks nice. Lighting, make sure people can see it. If you can add some light and bring some attention, that is really valuable. Levels, you don't want everything to be super low. You want things to have eye level, and also by adding levels, you can add more space to display more things. And labels. You want people to be able to clearly see what it is, what the prices are. So these labels, we have a laser cutter at home, and these little metal gift or business cards are super cheap. Buy a pack of 50 of them and it's like $10. So I started using these I used to handwrite on stickers that I'd put on the bottom side of the bowl. My handwriting is not great. I needed to print something, and this is just bringing it up one notch. So it clearly shows what it is, you know, curly walnut bowl and the price, and then has my Sunset Woodshop logo on it. Just a great way for people to be able to come up and see what the prices are and what the things are. Also related to labeling, so you get picture here. So when you're signing your pieces, put in some practice. I already said my handwriting is pretty terrible, but I've put in a lot of practice to try and get a good signature with my wood burner. So I use the ballpoint tip, so it's just a ball soldered onto the end of the burner, and it works pretty well for signatures. So I like to put name, the type of wood, and the year that I did it. But you want to come up with something that's unique. Some people have a brand that they'll do, where you can have a brand made and be able to burn it into the bottom, or have a signature that isn't necessarily legible, but it's recognizable. I like having a signature that people can actually read, so they'd have a better shot at figuring out where they bought this in case they ever want to come back and buy another bowl. So 3 L's: looks, lights, levels, and labels. For me, it's been really helpful for what is this going to look like? How can I make this more attractive so when people come up to it, they're more likely to be interested in buying? We are all amateurs here. There's no professional wood turners, wood sellers here, but you want to give the impression that you're competent and you know what you're doing. So make it look kind of professional. As a club, we have these stretchy tablecloths that go over it that make it look pretty nice. And then I just bought some black tablecloths on Amazon that were pretty cheap, just to add a little bit more of that touch of class. This shelf I built for the show that we had back in April, and it's just LED strip light that has that tape back that you just put on underneath it, and it really adds to the booth. I'll just unplug it here for a second. Things really start to disappear under the shelf there, but you add that light and it really starts to pop. So you don't always have the opportunity to add lighting. You might not have access to electricity. One of my future plans, one of the toys that I get to buy because I get to sell some of my stuff, is a battery pack that I'll be able to plug in anytime, anywhere that I set this up. And it can just go under the table, be able to plug it in and have lights. So I already talked a little bit about it, but you want to be able to get people into the booth. So what is going to attract someone's attention? You want something that can be kind of a statement piece that people are going to be like, oh, wow, look at that. And, walk into the booth. I've brought in before, I made a big 18-inch diameter sphere on a pedestal. And I've taken that to a couple of shows, and a lot of people want to come up and they want to touch that and they want to hear about it. And several people who have done shows with me can give the spiel themselves about what it is. It's a truncated icosahedron. It's got 20 hexagons and 12 pentagons. I know there are a few people that can rattle that off just as easily as I can because I told that story over and over and over. I haven't sold it yet. It's a $1,200 plus item. Not easy to sell something like that, but it brought people into the booth, and then they might see that, but then they'll take the time to look at other things. I know when I go to a show, I try to avoid making eye contact. I don't want to talk to people. I just want to walk, and if there's something that catches my eye, then I'll go and look at it. Because I know if they make eye contact with me and say hi, all of a sudden I'm going to be talking to them. And just like Costco, Costco knows for every 5 minutes that someone is in the store, they're going to spend another $50. So the more that you can keep someone in the booth, the more likely it is that someone's going to buy something. So what's going to be your hook that's going to get them to come in and look at your items? And then engage with people. If you're sitting back behind the booth, you're going to get some sales. You're going to get people to come and look at your stuff. And you might actually get some people to come look at your stuff because they don't feel like, oh, this guy's gonna use car salesman me and try and get me to buy something. But you will do so much better if you get up and talk to people. And even as they're walking by, hey, how's it going today? What have you found interesting today? Have a conversation with people so that they feel comfortable talking to you and asking you questions so that you can start to tell the story that is going to sell the item. This is a fairly typical bowl. Not too much special about this. It is pretty, it's nice, it's well made, but I can't compete with a plastic bowl from Target as far as utility and price. And so I'm not just going to sell this as a bowl very easily, but I can tell this as a story and create a lot more value in the mind of the people looking at it. So again, have a story. We sell more than wood, we sell stories. I work at Nike, so Nike is also all about telling a story. Michael Jordan, it's gotta be the shoes. So storytelling is a big part of my career that pays for the house. This is my career that just pays for the toys. One of the dangers, though, of talking is sometimes you get that person that would just spend all day in the booth talking to you. A lot of times it's someone that has done some wood turning and they just want to talk forever. I love talking to those people, honestly. To talk about wood turning, what they do, they're always really interested in what you do. Everybody that comes into your booth is going to say you do amazing work. I have had very few ego boosts in my life as big as going to a show, because Gathering of the Guilds at the convention center had probably a couple thousand people come through the booth and say, oh, your work is amazing. You feel pretty good about yourself after a couple of days of that. But then you have that guy that wants to talk and spend an hour and a half in the booth, and you've got other people coming by. So sometimes you have to get to the yes or the no and get on to the next customer. And sometimes maybe it's you acknowledge other people that are looking at your stuff. You're talking to someone that's interested and you say, hi, how you doing? And then if they show interest, just a minute, I'll be back. I have to help another customer. Usually they're really great of, oh yeah, go ahead. All of these situations in selling that I've been in at shows, the people are just so amazing. They're there interested. If they weren't interested, they would just kept walking. So you naturally filter out people who are really interested in your work. It's a great time. Back at the end of COVID, when everyone had stimulus money in their pocket, that was really great. You know, oh, how much is this? $95? Oh, that's great. I'll take it. Then once the stimulus money started drying up, $95? Oh, maybe not. I'll be back. I will be back almost never turns out. I'm going to go look at the rest and I'll come back. Once in a while, you might see them. Yeah. I'll do some negotiating. Pricing is a very difficult topic. We could spend a whole demonstration just talking about pricing. I feel like I'm just now starting to get comfortable figuring out what my prices should be. And even then, at shows, I'll have people come up to me, other people who do wood turning, and say, your prices are too low. And then I'll have other people say, your prices are too high. I'm starting to figure it out, but it's not an easy thing to figure out. And about pricing and about selling, the transaction, when you need to have a couple of different ways to collect payments. A lot of people are going to pay cash, and it depends on the type of show that you're doing. Make sure that you have change ready to be able to make change for people, but then be able to collect credit card. Having something like a Square reader where you can scan the card, these are not very expensive. And depending on the type of device you have, a lot of them will plug into the Lightning port. Apple now went to the USB-C port and Square hasn't done a USB-C plug-in reader yet. So I had to get this Bluetooth reader. But having a way to collect credit card payment is really important. And having a way to having bags available and tissue paper to be able to wrap things up is really important. Not everybody's going to want it, but it's going to mean a lot to them that you offer. Would you want me to wrap this up, or do you want a bag? A lot of times they might have a bag with other things that they've already bought. Sometimes they don't, but just have that available ready for them. Commissions, that's another one where I avoid that during a show. If somebody wants something special, I will give them my card, share my information, reach out to me later, because I've never had anybody follow up from trying to do a commission at a show. It does happen sometimes, but for me, it hasn't been worth the time trying to do that. Here's my information, reach out to me later, we can figure something out. Any questions? I've been going pretty fast. Okay. So a couple of other topics. Yeah. That's a great question. So what sells well and what doesn't sell well? There are some things that have always sold well for me. I've made more money off of selling bowls than anything else. Price points can be pretty high on the bowls, and there's always something there with the bowls. But the next biggest thing for me has been rolling pins. I've sold a lot of rolling pins, and I pretty much sell out at every show that I go to. And I always have back stock under the table. These little lanterns have done really well for me as well, at about $40 to $50. These are just, I've brought these before. So it's a little battery powered tea light, and the light also will help draw people in. And adding to the story, so these tea lights, I think you brought these. I think I learned this from you. And so this tea light particularly will stay on for 8 hours and then turn off for 16 hours and then turn back on the next day. People love hearing stories like that. I've just added a whole bunch of value in their minds with telling that little story about the tea light. And so those have done well for me, but honestly, the thing that sells well at one show, the next time you don't sell any, and you'll sell something totally different. And it is really difficult to predict what I'm going to need a lot of. So at the Gathering of the Guilds, the big show back in April, I don't remember how many I brought, but I probably brought like 10 each of the mini birdhouses and the mini lanterns. And I almost sold out on the first day. I went home that night and made 10 more of the mini lanterns. And then just about sold out by the end of the show. So you never really know what's going to sell super well. Other questions? So pricing, I did want to talk a little bit more about pricing because it is really difficult to figure out. Talk to people. There are a lot of people here who have done sales that can help you figure out pricing. For bowls, there are people who like to use formulas based off of the diameter and height and the type of wood that you can come up with a baseline price. But a lot of times it's going to take experience. It takes time to figure out pricing. And there are some really important considerations. You know, I'm doing this for fun. I'm not trying to pay the bills with this. So if I spend 3 hours on something and sell it for $100, to me, that's not going to be a problem. But there are people who are doing this professionally for their job. And if you go in and undercut them significantly, you can distort the market. And there's a lot that goes into this stuff. And craftsmanship and art and quality it's not the same as buying a plastic bowl at Target. It should be worth more. I don't know how many of you have experienced this where someone hears that you do woodworking and like, oh, could you make me a table? I saw this at IKEA. Could you do it cheaper? No. I somebody saw a picture of this bowl. I'm like, oh, I want one of those. I'm like, and it was my boss. He says he wants to buy one of these. I'm like, I always feel a little bit weird about when people want to buy stuff at work. I don't actively try to sell at work because I'm a manager. I have people that report to me. I don't want them to feel like they have to buy from me because I'm their boss. But if somebody sees my work, and I'll show people my work, and I'll show it on Instagram and stuff, and if they want to buy it, I'm happy to sell it. I had someone reach out recently. They saw something like, "Is that for sale?" Like, it's all for sale. There are very few pieces that. Usually it's my wife that gets a hold of it and says, "This is mine." But then she'll still even say, "If you need to sell this, you can make me another one." But so he said he wants to buy one, and I said, "Okay, but that's going to be a $200 plus bowl, and then I'll let him come back if he actually wants to buy it." So these things are going to be expensive. I have some things that are at different price points. So these head massagers and back scratchers are only $20. So I do have some of those things that are going to be an impulse buy. Someone's coming into the booth and, oh, this is really cool, but I'm not ready to drop $200 or more on one of these fancy lighthouses. But you know what? My dad had one of these and would love to have one. So I'll get one of these. So an impulse buy. This is actually, so I buy a whole bunch of these back scratchers, just cheap back scratchers off of Amazon for like $1.50 a piece. And I take the plastic handle off and I take a pen blank and I turn a handle and glue it on there. So I've got probably less than $2 of material, well, maybe $2.50 in materials, and probably less than 5 minutes of time, and then sell it for $20. But now that I've said this, our next show, I'm going to have 5 other people selling the same thing. But that's also important when we have these sales, we'll talk amongst ourselves, not necessarily trying to price fix, but to have an idea of, okay, what are you selling? I obviously have a lot of different things that I make, and this is not everything that I make, but I'll sometimes not bring something or a kind of a category that I do so that there's less overlap and we can kind of figure things out. That's also a great opportunity to help figure out your pricing. If I'm selling pizza cutters for $55, sometimes other people are going to be there selling pizza cutters that they bought the hardware kit at Rockler and paid probably 3 times as much as I paid for my kit. So their starting price is going to have to be significantly more than mine. So sometimes there's some touchy things that you kind of have to navigate, especially doing it with a group of people. Yes. Although, yeah, that's another one, kind of like what's going to sell well, what doesn't sell well. Sometimes what you think the price point is going to be might not be what the price point ends up being. I've had street fairs where they're buying multiple pieces at $200 a piece. And then at Gathering of Guilds, sometimes you sell $5,000 worth of bowls, and then the next year you sell 2. So it's so variable, and you're never quite sure. It can be a little bit tricky, though, if you start trying to adjust your prices based off of the venue. So this, like I put $185 on this monkey puzzle bowl. It's probably actually more than that. But if I showed up at Gathering of the Guilds with this piece at $250 and it didn't sell, and then I go to, or say it did sell at $250, and then I'm at Multnomah Days out here, a street fair in August that we do as a club, and you know, it's a street fair, so it's a little bit different market. So and I make another one and I sell it for $180. What happens if that person that bought it for $250 happens to walk by and see a bowl similar to the one they bought for significantly less? So you can damage your image if you try and play with your prices too much. For sure. So that big sphere that I brought in last year on the pedestal, so I had that for $1,200 at Gathering of the Guilds. I sold just one of those spheres last year for $550. And the guy that bought it came by the booth again this year and he saw this year's version with the really nice pedestal and was kind of disappointed because then I thought maybe he was going to buy this one this year too, but he didn't. He wasn't quite ready to pull the trigger on it. But so pricing can be tricky, and playing different markets can be a little bit dangerous. Yeah, so different places. So PSI or Penn State Industries is one of the really good ones. Sometimes Rockler has been on sale and I've bought it there, but usually they're not going to be a competitive price. Sometimes Craft Supplies is going to be better. But I do a lot of research trying to find what's the best deal. My wife, since she does jewelry professionally online, like that's a big part of her business, and she sources stuff direct from Asia. I haven't got to that point where I'm trying to source direct from factories. But some of the interesting things, so Rockler has a pizza cutter and they sell a sheath for it. I've not been able to find anyone else that sells hardware that sells a sheath. I found that Pampered Chef will sell you a replacement cover for their pizza cutters. And so I order the hardware from Penn State, but sometimes I find these kits cheaper from Ruth Niles or at his booth at some of our local shows. And then I order the sheath from Pampered Chef. And it has a little tiny Pampered Chef logo on it, but I don't think anybody has ever noticed that before. So putting in some time to figure out where to get them, that is part of the job too. So the question was if I could comment on selling through galleries. Not really. I haven't ever sold through a gallery before. So I sell through the gift shop out in Troutdale, which is a little bit different type of market. But I haven't broken into the gallery scene yet. So she's only taking a 20% commission, which is incredibly low. So 40% is considered a good commission. The fact that she's 20%, and sometimes I've even told her that that's pretty low, but she's happy, so I'm happy. Yeah. I have in the past, but I don't anymore. For 100%.
$35 including shipping.
Yeah. Yeah. I sold a few and it was a lot of work trying to maintain it, and I just felt like I couldn't sell the story as well as when I'm in person and I can talk to them and I can tell them about where I got this monkey puzzle on the other side of Vancouver, and talked with this lady and we had a great conversation, and I brought several of them home, and this is the smallest of the 4 blocks that I have, and I've got the other 3 in the shop, and I'm gonna make them, and you can just spin all these stories, and I do it honestly. I'm not making stuff up, but storytelling is a huge part of this. And I found that I just couldn't do that online. Any other questions? How do I do what? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, how do you do this? Like, do use like a chainsaw or, and you know, it's on a lathe and it's spinning this way. And talking about wood is another really good part. So most of this is locally salvaged wood. And I can tell you where most of these trees came from. I can tell you about how it's oriented in the tree. So this is sitting in the tree, like here's the center of the tree and it's growing up this way. And that's where the bowl comes from. Whereas this bowl, it's growing up in the tree this way. Stories like that mean so much to people. Like, oh, and then all of a sudden they can start to picture it. And burls. Everybody's heard of burls, but nobody knows what a burl is. And so just talking about what a burl is and describing it, that's a great story to tell. Spalting. We've had some great demos about spalting and what that is. And being able to tell that story, that the spalt lines, I always describe it as they're two different types of fungus, and that's their battlefront because they have chemical warfare against each other. People love that stuff, and it's a great way to explain spalting, but it creates a great story that is just increasing the mental value that people will have for your items. Yeah. Yeah, so on most things, I will put my name, the type of wood, and the year is what I usually do. There are some things that, you know, on some of the knick-knack stuff, I mean, there's not a good place to sign this, so I don't do it on here, but a lot of them I do. I don't sign any of this. Sometimes I'll sign stuff like these trees, but not always. But something like a bowl, anything that's higher end, for sure I'm signing it. Yeah. So do I let people handle it? For sure. The big sphere, I'm a little bit more protective of it, but I'll lift it up and hand it to them carefully so that they can see how light it is. But especially with green turned wood, so this walnut bowl was twice turned, so it stayed round, but the curl in this, if you turn this green, it's gonna get some waviness. And if you can put that in someone's hand and explain how wood shrinks, you add a lot of story to it, you add a lot of value to it. But people love to feel the wood. They love, pretty much everybody feels it and then smells it. Like, I love the smell of wood. Like, you're not smelling any wood right now. You're smelling some of the finish on it maybe, but.
Finish with food safe finishes, or is that a concern? I mean, somebody might want to be salad or something like that.
Yeah, I try to use natural finishes most of the time. So oil and wax, usually walnut oil. So the doctor's finishes and most finishes are food safe once they're cured. And you can have that conversation with them. Sometimes if a bowl I know is going to be hardware, I'll use like a poly finish. And then I'll just talk to them about how this finish, once it's cured, it's food safe. You use a plastic cutting board, this is going to be every bit as safe, food safe as something like that. But it is a really good story, especially most of the time I'm using very natural finishes, like the wax stick that I was doing on the stuff up there. That's very food safe. Shellac is food safe. A little bit of wax, food safe. So it's another valuable story to be able to tell people. So $50 for the big ones. And then this one I'd sell for like 40, and then these little ones for 35. So I've got, what are they made out of? These curly ones are myrtle wood, and then some cherry, and then a couple sycamore. And I try to have a variety, just to give people options. Not necessarily the wood that's popular, but if it has something to give it character. Like the myrtle with this is a very curly myrtle. So if it's curly, if it's got interesting wood grain, that's what sells it. So This cherry one is pretty basic and generic. I've found that just a plain wood doesn't sell nearly as well as if it has some character. Again, you sell stories and you increase the value. I finish it. So most of the finish is I will wet it down to raise the grain and resand it multiple times. Otherwise, the first time they wash it, it's going to get fuzzies. And then so once I've wetted it down and sanded it 2 or 3 times, then I'll usually finish it with wax.
When I did with my land, I told them to 60 to 100. So I made fancy, made a hold. So it's all it's kicking us. They're gonna take that and put it in your drawer at home. It goes up and it's part of your kitchen.
Yeah. Last year at Christmas time, I bought a blacksmithing forge. I've got an idea for making hooks, but I do not have the time. I haven't pulled the forge out since spring break. So I collect hobbies faster than I can actually do them. But with my hobbies, I've always tried to make my hobbies pay for themselves. So for years, I was really into freshwater planted aquariums, and I would sell plants. I would build CO2 systems and sell them. So I've always tried to make my hobbies pay for themselves, partially because I grew up with no money. And so I grew up on a farm where in the spring, my dad would take my sister and me to the dairy. We would buy the little bull calves. Dairies don't have much use for bulls. And so we would raise them, and then in the fall we would take them to the auction and sell them. And so from a very early age, I learned to be very entrepreneurial. So I grew up in Eastern Washington. Every year for Thanksgiving, we'd come here to Beaverton, to my aunt and uncle's house for Thanksgiving, and then the day after Thanksgiving, we would go out to the Christmas tree farms, and we would get a truckload of Christmas trees and take them back home and have a family Christmas tree lot. So all of this is kind of built into my DNA. And then the artistic side, my great-grandmother was a watercolor artist out in Newport and sold through a lot of galleries. So I feel like it's part of who I am. A lot of people will ask, like, so when are you gonna quit Nike and do this full time? Never. I make a lot more at Nike than I could ever make doing this. This is hobby. And I'm getting started early so that I can sell some and make some money, and I can outfit my shop with all the best tools. So since my wife she's self-employed and has a company, I'm rolling in under her business from a legal perspective. So we do have an LLC. And so I track my expenses, I track my revenue. So far, I've been able to spend it all, so I haven't had profit, and my revenue has been below the IRS reporting numbers, which they changed the threshold, but they haven't enforced it the last 2 years. But it was like $20,000 and 600 is what they moved it to, but they haven't actually put it into practice yet. So I expect that this year they probably will. And so I tracked my expenses in the last several years. I've done the books, and sometimes at the end in December, there's some big purchases to get my profit to zero.
Jason, thank you very much.
So again, selling isn't for everyone, but if you want to try it, let me know, because we have our show the first week of December here at the Art Center. That sounds right. I would have to look at the calendar, but.
Excellent, thank you so much, yeah. Which club are you talking about? That you're in? Which club? Yeah. This one. Oh, yeah. So, with the shows and stuff, it's through us.
Yeah, it's through us. So Northwest Woodturners pays the upfront price for the booth. And then we'll take all the costs that the club paid. And then all the sales that everyone makes, and then we'll just take a percentage, whatever percentage we need to do to pay back the club.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So if you sell $1,000 worth of stuff and I sold 100 for the stuff,
I would pay-
everybody would pay 10%, whether that's.
So I pay the bulk of it.